Hello, and welcome to MyCounselor.Online. I'm your host, Brittany East, and the featured counselor joining us today is Ryenn Yarbrough. Ryenn is taking a dive into a topic that many people feel like men don't need to know about, but she's braving it today. Before we jump into that, though, Ryenn, can you take a minute to introduce yourself for those viewers who may not know you yet?
Yeah, my name's Ryenn. I have been working at MCO for a little over a year and a half. I love that I get to, not have to like leave Jesus and God on the shelf and my faith on the shelf as I do counseling, but to bring that into session. I love that. I like to remind myself I am not the healer, that the Holy Spirit is here in our space, and it just makes my job and my life really wonderful. So I love what I do. Love getting to sit and be with and hear just amazing stories.
Yeah, no, I do also really appreciate that about MCO is that we get to really bring our faith into everything. And it sounds like that's a huge part of your life and you're really passionate about it. So today your article is titled, What Men Need to Know About Menstruation. So what inspired you to write this article?
Yeah, a couple things. It was several years ago. I think I was in grad school, and I was sitting at like a Friendsgiving, and a friend was sharing with me just like all the things that he really wanted to know about menstruation, like going to the gynecologist. Like he just had so many questions, and I was like, like why do you want to know all this information? And he was just like, well, one day, like I'm gonna be a dad, and I want to be able to like have a conversation with my daughters. And it just like really, like I get emotional, like bringing it up is just such just so important, that was so passionate, like something he was just so passionate about. And at that point, like nowhere near close to having kids, and it's just like was really intrigued and really wanted to know. And I had written my first article after MCO about tracking our cycles, and I had my dad and a couple of my guy friends like repost it on Facebook, and they were like, oh my gosh, like I knew none of these things. And I'm like, yeah, most women don't either.
Fair.
So yes. And so it just kind of like ignited this like thought, was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like this is important for everybody to know.
Yeah. So your article, like, is your audience, are you thinking just like men when you wrote this article? Or are you thinking women can benefit from this?
Yeah, definitely both. Anyone who loves a cyclical being. Um, so, so as you read in the article, women are cyclical beings, just like men, but men are 24-hour cycle and women have a monthly cycle. And so, just the understanding, understanding yourself and understanding your friends, understanding the women in your life. Very important, very helpful.
Yeah. And it seems like, it sounds like you've met some really open-minded men who like went to this, but like, why do you think in general, like men do tend to like shy away from this, or really, or even not even shy, they feel like that's not like, I'm not allowed to know, like, that's just not my place. Like, where do you think that comes from?
Our culture. um
Fair.
It's really sad when you start talking to women just about like their education around their menstrual cycle, how that was taught to them, how they refer to their bodies growing up, and there's just like a lot of shame and just a lot of like just really sad things around the supernatural process that our body goes through. And so with that, it makes sense that men in our life would also just not understand, wouldn't have the information, would think, it's dirty, it's gross, just really shameful, hurtful things. And so to open the eyes of women, but then to open the eyes of men in our culture and in our life, to help break that cycle of shame, and to I just I might get into it a little later, but just one of the really important stories in my life was that when I started my menstrual cycle at 12 or 13, My dad came up to me and was like, with tears in his eye, was just like, "I'm so proud of you. Like, welcome to womanhood.
Oh
Like if you ever need anything, let me know." And just like really just broke a lot of that shame for me.
my
And so it just was so important to me. And I just hope everyone needs to be like Steve. I get terrified thinking about it.
Yeah, that's so sweet. And clearly this is like coming from just a place of like deep conviction for you, just because you saw how much of a difference it made in your life. It sounds like to have a man who you looked up to, who cared for you, to understand this, just like that, just like it clearly just like puts you on a whole nother trajectory of like viewing the woman's body and the
Oh my
cycles and
gosh,
everything.
absolutely.
So to dive into the science part, so what are the four parts, like so that we can actually learn, like what it
Yes,
actually is, like what are the four
yes.
parts of the menstrual cycle?
Yeah. So most people just think of the menstrual cycle as when you're bleeding, as your
Okay.
period.
Yeah.
And that's really, usually for most women, it's like 5 to 7 days, and it's so much more than that. And so your four phases is menstruation. That is a big part. Your week of bleeding. Your follicular phase, it's such a hard word for me to say. Ovulation, and your luteal phase.
Okay.
And so that is, for most people, it's encompassing about 30 days.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting. I remember in your article you kind of described it as like spring, summer,
Mhm.
fall, and winter, which I have actually never had to
Yeah,
describe like that. And I had to take anatomy in college, and I feel like, and obviously, like, I mean, I got it because obviously I have it, but I was like, at the same time, that would have been like actually really helpful to
yes,
feel
it makes
like
so
that.
much sense.
Is that something like you thought of on your own when you thought about the different phases, or is that how like you like learned it for yourself when you were learning about the different
Yeah,
phases?
I cannot take credit for that. I during That was like right after college, I think, for my undergrad. I really started to just like dive into understanding more about my body and menstruation, and through several different people I follow on Instagram and TikTok and things like that. I discovered the linking that with seasons. And it just, it makes so much sense. When we're in ovulation, it's like a bright summer day. It's like I have all the energy in the world. I have higher testosterone. It's just like, let's go work out. Let's have a higher intensity workout, right? And then when you're, heading towards fall, your luteal phase, there might be some PMS symptoms. We're slowing down and going into our winter, which is, a little rougher for our bodies, but a beautiful cycle indeed.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I hope people when they read your article, they like can kind of feel like, oh, maybe that even those words would be easy, like, oh, I'm in my spring phase. Like everything feels good. Like my body's about to create the egg, and then like, I'm in my summer and like ready to go, and then fall and winter.
Yeah.
So I love that. Do you feel like there's any one phase that like a man should be like most aware of? Do you like, I mean, obviously like bleeding, but do you feel like there's any other parts that feel like, okay, like he needs to be really aware of like this phase? This is probably like even more important.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give like the counselor of all answers to this one, Brittany, it depends.
Fair,
So
fair.
so I mean it really depends on, if you are and your spouse are trying to conceive. It
Mm,
might be more important to be aware of that ovulation phase, that follicular phase, knowing when those like 48, 24 hours of peak ovulation are gonna be, that would be really important. If your spouse or your daughter, the woman in your life, is really struggling with like PMS symptoms, maybe
mhm.
that luteal phase would be more important to understand, and like, go get some chocolates. Hey honey, we might not do like a really intense workout today, or
Mhm.
maybe like having more introspective conversations during that time would be more important. So it definitely just depends on what's important for the woman in your life, and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and then as long as I mean, as far as like when men are like helping to learn about the menstrual cycle, just so we can understand maybe like why the women in their life are acting a certain way or like feeling things differently depending on where they are. Do you feel like it's also important for men to understand like how like what devices the women use to catch their blood, or like even talk about that, or how do you feel like men should even approach that with women then?
Yeah, definitely, this is um it's you get to, as a woman, you get to determine where or how you want to catch your blood. There are so many options. And so I would definitely like just, come behind everyone and like encourage them to try a bunch of different options. We have period panties, pads, disposable, non-disposable ones, cups, discs, tampons, so many different things. There's a lot of literature coming out about the safety of those items. So wanting, to encourage you to do your own research, notice, and to know, the things that they put in certain tampons and pads and things like that. But as a guy, as someone who is, being encouraging throughout that kind of process, wanting to have a conversation around that is really like, how does your woman want you to be involved in that process?
Sure.
Right. If like we were talking about my dad earlier, like there was one moment when I was a teenager and I needed some pads and I texted him and he went and I, sent him, told him exactly what I needed and he went and got it for me. Right. And that was something that I felt like really, safe and easy to do. And, I felt really comfortable doing that for him. And that's something that he said, like, I'll do this for you. So I already knew that was going to be a safe place to go to. And that's something like I've shared with my husband before too. Like will you go grab this for me or will you do this for me? And he has, shared with me like that, even before I've ever asked him to do that. He has shared with me, like, I would do this for you if you'd ever needed it. And so I think that really is the key is just having it out there. I will go into maybe a uncomfortable situation because this is something that is so natural and shouldn't be shameful.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I appreciate just that. It seems like the heart around this is really not even just about men having knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but really just taking away stigma to not make it so shameful where it feels like I have to hide this, when it's like kind of you talk about like God like made this cycle in our bodies. Like
Yes.
this is how new life comes about. Like it's just a part of how you it's like, oh, like how I breathe. This is just a part of me. This is what I need. So I just really appreciate that heart. And it seems like, there's maybe different ways, like, or in my mind, I don't know, like whether it's a man, like, okay, a dad is reading this and he wants to talk to his daughter about this versus maybe a husband who's reading this and wants to talk to his wife about this. Like, oh, okay, I feel safe. Like, I feel good to talk about this. Do you feel like there's different approaches, like a dad talking to his daughter or a husband talking to his wife if they haven't really approached this topic before?
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're going to talk to our spouse differently than we would our children. And the certain boundaries and precautions would be, withheld, based on your connection and your relationship. I think, like you had mentioned, like the heart of this is just having that openness and understanding, like, hey, this is not what my body does, so I don't know. And as you're talking to someone, if you're talking to your wife, like that's probably someone who has been menstruating for many years on her own and has been, knows a lot more about her body than maybe your young daughter who's, discovering this for the first time. And so, holding those two differently in that way is like, hey, like you're still figuring this out. You haven't maybe, as a daughter, like haven't really like, maybe we want to like, do you want some options when I go and grip some pads for you? Or like, or like, are you loving this kind or this brand? But maybe for that, woman in her 30s or 40s, like she's like, I know, I got it. Like, I need you to pick this up for me, right? Or like, hey, like I know like what happens during my luteal phase and like it's coming up, like, and being more understanding about that. And but yeah, maybe you're just having that little bit of an adjustment, just as you're figuring things out as a young girl.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So what final piece of advice would you give to someone who's watching this?
Yeah. I think that, this is just something that, God created the menstrual cycle. This is an importance in understanding our bodies, and it's so natural. And I'm gonna, bring up my dad once more. Like when he went and bought me pads that time, he was in that aisle, right? And all these, there's maybe several women in there in that aisle too, as he walked down it, and he was standing there, and I can just picture this so clearly. And he was like, as I walked down the aisle, all the women started to scatter. And he was like, and he just like couldn't understand why. And so he comes back with the pads that he had bought me, and he was like, I don't ever want you to feel ashamed of this. He's like, this is something that is so natural. And I'd get teary-eyed thinking about it because it just so impacted the way that I view my body, and how important it is to be grateful for the natural process of that our body goes through to prepare for childbirth, or just to be healthy in our cycle every month. And so and just that in that we get to discover so many things about our health and our body's needs. And again, as someone who loves a cyclical being, you get to discover those things about the people in your life as well, and having them have the opportunity and the voice to figure those things out too. So, yeah.
No, that's so beautiful. Well, Ryenn, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us to share really your heart for a topic that doesn't sound that deep, like, okay, a man needs to know about, okay, but really, like, really digging into like, hey, like, just, I really appreciate your vulnerability, just sharing those stories, because it's like, it's so, like, because I have a young daughter, very young, we're a minute away. But I don't know, it's like, even for me, I'm like, oh, this has really changed my perspective about how, one of my husband's always going to be involved, but like how exactly to be involved. Like, I feel like you've given really practical examples, just sharing your life. So I just feel so grateful for you taking the time to write this article, to have this on your heart, and to share it with all of us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And if you want to check out other videos that we have made in the past with other counselors, you can go to our channels on Facebook. You can find us if you search for Love My Counselor. On Instagram, we are also at Love My Counselor. And on YouTube, if you search MyCounselor.Online Christian Counseling, you will find plenty of archived videos of different interviews that we've done. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another session of My Counselor Online.